If you are still editing your own videos, then listen up, because it's costing you a lot of money every single month, most likely without you even knowing it. At least that was the case for me. You see, I used to think that hiring an editor would be super expensive and also kind of like editing, and surely no one would be able to do it the way I wanted it, so why even bother? But a few months ago, I finally decided to hire an editor, and it has been a huge unlock for my business. So today I'm going to show you why editing your own videos keeps you poor, how you can hire your own editor that frees up a bunch of time, help you grow even faster on YouTube, and also make you more money. And lastly, I'm going to show you how to systemize it all to make the process super easy. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so let's start out with why editing your own videos actually keeps you poor, because I think a lot of people make the mistake, just like I did, of thinking that editing your own videos saves you money. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And to really drive this point home, I want to tell you a little story of what happened to me, because this is really important. So when I started on YouTube, I was making videos for my now biggest YouTube channel called Jacob's Vocal Academy. And on that, I was just aiming to make money from Google AdSense. So essentially, the product was the YouTube videos. It was a product and the marketing in one. So all I had to do was make videos all day, which was super chill. But the problem was that it was super slow to make a decent amount of money. I mean, now I do make a pretty good amount of money from it, but to build that up takes a long time, and it also caps out pretty quickly because it doesn't scale like a normal business do. So I finally decided to build a product and build a real business selling stuff online. So that led me to build my coaching program where I taught Danes how to grow on YouTube. But really quickly, I ran into a problem, because now I had to spend a bunch of time working on making the product good, spending time with my clients, helping them out. I also spent a bunch of time on sales calls, making funnels, making webinars, and all that kind of stuff. And all that stuff was something that I really had to prioritize, because that was actually what was moving the needle in my business. But then the problem was that I didn't have time to make that many YouTube videos. I did make some videos, but it was kind of sloppy, to be honest. It wasn't as high quality as I wanted. I wasn't able to spend as much time on it as I wanted, and also I didn't post a lot at all. So I was actually becoming the bottleneck of my own business, so I couldn't really keep up with all of the tasks that I had on my plate, at least not without working 80-hour weeks, which is not something that I'm willing to do now that I have a wife and kids and all that kind of stuff. And this ultimately led me to burn out completely. I wasn't really a fan of what I was doing in my business. I hated a lot of the stuff that I was doing, not because I had a bad product or anything like that. I actually liked a lot of that, but the tasks I did in my business wasn't really giving me energy. It was just draining me completely. This was ultimately one of the many reasons why I ended up burning out and closing down my business. And now I'm starting all over, making the business from scratch, doing everything in English now. And now I want to do things in a completely different way that's way more sustainable and that gives me much more energy and doesn't make me the bottleneck of my own business. So as you can probably tell, one of the big shifts that I made now that I reset my business was hiring an editor. And the reason why I chose to outsource that is because, first of all, it's not really a transferable skill. It's not really something that moves the needle in my business, and you guys probably don't even care if it's me or my editor editing my videos. Most likely you like my videos even more now that my editor is doing the editing, because he's way better than me. So not only am I saving a bunch of time, but I'm also making better videos. And also, one of the things that really helped me make this decision was just doing the math, because before making this decision, I was still being like, yeah, but I like editing and no one can do it like I can. And all those excuses that you probably also make right now. But think about it. If you spend 10 hours editing every single video and you post one video per week, that's 40 hours per month just on editing. That's a full work week just editing videos, which is not something that moves the needle in your business and actually makes you money. And if you look at that over a year, that's 12 weeks. That's 3 months just editing videos. Imagine how much more you could do if you had 3 months more every single year. How much better would your marketing be? How much better would your sales page be? How much better would your product be? Not to mention how much more energy would you get? Because if you're like me, then it would stress you out that you can't keep up with all the stuff that you have to do. So for me, freeing up that time also meant that I'm having much more energy and much more space in my head to actually think about making the products better and helping my clients and all that kind of stuff. And imagine if I had to spend 80 hours a week doing all the stuff in my business, I would be exhausted. And then I wouldn't really have energy to fix the stuff that I would have to fix for my customers and even make my business better. I would just run my business as it was and just maintaining all the time and not growing it and not improving my business at all. So yeah, the whole point with this story is that you shouldn't only see hiring an editor as an expense. You should see it as an opportunity to free up your time, and then imagine what else you could do with that time that makes you even more money than editing your videos. Because as I said, editing your own videos is most likely not what drives you revenue in your business. So yeah, I think you get the point now, but this leads me to the next problem. How do you actually go ahead and hire a really good editor that actually saves you time and doesn't do the opposite, where you have to spend just as much time dealing with the editor and giving feedback and all that kind of stuff, because that could also happen if you don't hire the right person. So you really want to make sure that you hire the right person and that you communicate with them in a really good way and actually have a system for hiring and communicating so that it doesn't end up just costing you time instead. When I wanted to hire my editor, I started out with looking at websites like Fiverr and Upwork, because that's usually my go-to platforms for outsourcing. But to be honest, the quality was absolute garbage. The editors I found on there was really cheap, but the quality was just as low. So after trying that, I was like, where the heck do the really good editors actually hide? And that led me to do a bunch of research, and what I found was there was a couple of ways to actually find these good editors. And one of the ways was to look on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. So if you use that method, what you want to do is you just search for YouTube video editor in the search field, and then you look through the first options, and most likely you can find really good editors already there. And then what you can do to find even more editors is that you can click on their profile and then go to the people that they follow, because what happens is good editors usually follow other good editors and get inspiration from other people like that. So you will most likely be able to find a lot of good editors just going through the following list. And then you just take a look on their profiles and see if they have something on there that looks kind of like the stuff that you want, because they are probably posting a bunch of stuff that they made themselves. And you just want to make sure that the editor that you choose in the end is someone that is doing something really close to what you actually want. Because if you have an education-based channel like I have, then it doesn't really make sense to hire an editor that usually works with entertainment-based channels, because they don't know how to make videos like this. So they might be really good editors, but they also have to know how that niche and type of content works, okay? And then you just send the message to a bunch of good editors and try to get them on a call. And then the rule of thumb is to have as many calls as possible. I know it's super annoying, at least I thought so, and it takes a bunch of time, but I promise that the time spent there is definitely worth it, because it saves you so much time in the end if you compare it to actually ending up with the wrong editor and then have to find a new one and all that kind of stuff. So get on as many calls as possible to talk to them and find the right one for you. And then you would just want to ask them a couple of questions, tell them what you want in an editor, and see if they actually know the language of a good editor. So what I did was I told the editors what I wanted, and then I asked them a couple of questions to kind of figure out if they understood what I was saying, what kind of style I wanted, and also to see if they were speaking the language of a good editor. Because you can kind of hear from the words that they use to describe the style and the way that they want to edit it and all that kind of stuff, if they're actually good or not. And then after talking to as many editors as possible, then you pick maybe a handful or maybe 3 or something like that, and then you want to do a paid trial. And what you want to do there is pretty much just to pay them to edit maybe an intro or something like that of a video that you would probably do anyway. At least that was what I did. And the reason why I want to do that is because they can tell you that they did this and that, but in the end, what actually shows you what they can actually do is editing a real video. So after getting back that handful of edited videos, then you just pick the one that you like the most, and then you go with that editor. And by following this process, you are pretty sure that you get a really, really good editor. Now, to be honest, that is not completely how I did it, but it's how I would recommend other people to do it, because that is how you are most likely to find the best editor for you. What I did was I just had a call with a couple of editors, and then I chose my current editor. He's actually editing my video right now, so shout out to you, Wes. You're doing a really good job. And after talking to him, I just had a really good gut feeling. I could really hear that he knew what he was talking about. I also have a bunch of experience editing videos myself, so yeah, I just went with him pretty quickly. And also, I didn't find him on X. I actually found him on a website called ytjobs.co, which is also a really good option for finding good editors. And the way you want to approach that website is pretty much just the same. You want to find good editors that are doing something close to what you want to do, and then just shoot them a message, send them a really good job post that are high quality so they actually want to work with you. You actually have a couple of free DMs on ytjobs.co, so you don't even have to pay for the platform. And yeah, then you just get them on a call and do what I just told you. So X and ytjobs.co, that is, in my experience, the best places to find good editors. Now, you might be thinking, when does it actually make sense to hire an editor? Because I know some of you are really in the early stages of making a channel and building a business. So does it make sense for you to hire an editor already? And what I would say is I would recommend that you hire one as quickly as possible. Because as I said, you don't have to make that much money to actually make sense out of hiring one, because again, editing your own videos doesn't really move the needle in your business. So pretty much no matter what stage your business is in, then it makes sense to hire an editor. Now, you could argue that it would make sense to start out with editing your own videos, because then you get some editing experience and learn the skill and learn the language of editing, which makes it a lot easier to communicate and actually also recognize a good editor. So maybe start out with getting some experience, learning the craft yourself, at least the basics, and then you can start hiring as soon as possible. And then you might not be able to afford it simply because you don't have any money. But yeah, I would recommend that you do it as fast as possible. So if I were you, I would reinvest every single penny in editors as soon as possible, okay? And I know it sounds so easy for me to say, because you might look at me and see someone that is way ahead of you, or yeah, something like that. But I'm actually practicing what I preach, because I don't make any money from this channel yet. I still need to build a product that I can sell and all that kind of stuff. And I don't even have AdSense turned on yet. So I have to build everything from scratch. I need to build everything that I had in my Danish education company. But I still decided to hire an editor immediately, because then I'm able to free up a bunch of time that I can then spend on creating a really good product and getting that ready as soon as possible, so I can start making money, okay? All right, so now you might be thinking, all right, Jacob, I'm sold. I want to hire an editor. And how much do you need to spend to hire a good one? And this was also something that I had no idea about when I hired one. So I just talked to a bunch of different editors in different price ranges to get an idea of how good they actually were. And a lot of the cheaper ones were actually willing to edit a 1-minute video for me for free to check if they were actually good enough and if I were able to use them for my videos. But to be honest, a lot of them weren't really that good. At least they didn't live up to what I wanted in my videos. And I also watched a video from Ali Abdal. I think it was on Think Media's channel. So shout out to you guys. That was super helpful. And in that video, Ali Abdal explained his experience and how good of an editor you get for what price range. And after talking to a couple of editors myself, I realized that he was pretty spot on. So I want to share with you different price ranges that he shared with people in that video. So if you spend around $100 to $150 per video, then you get a pretty decent video editor. If you spend less than that, in my opinion, a lot of them would be really bad. You might be able to find a hidden gem, but again, you would also need to spend a bunch of time to actually find that one. So a good rule of thumb is that the more money you're willing to spend on an editor, the less time you need to spend hiring a good one, and also just dealing with the editor, because if you don't pay that much, then you most likely will end up just giving them a bunch of feedback and spending a bunch of time going back and forth with them, which is most likely not why you hired an editor in the first place. We're hiring to save time, so that's not what we want. So as I said, if you spend $100 to $150 per video, then you get a pretty decent video editor. If you spend around $200 to $300 per video, then you get a pretty good one. You can get really far with that, and to be honest, most education channels don't need that insane editing. So to be honest, for most of you, $200 to $300 would be by far enough. And then if you spend $500 or more, then you get a really good editor. I personally spent $500 per video, and my editor is way better than I am. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. And also what you need to keep in mind in terms of pricing is the location of the video editor, because if you spend $500 on a video editor in Europe or maybe in the US, then it's going to be way more expensive than hiring one from Brazil or some other country where the buying power isn't as strong as in the more developed countries. And a good example of this is I actually had a conversation with someone in the UK. We kind of talked about him editing my videos, but he wanted me to spend $1,000 per video. Then I talked to my current video editor, and he's from Brazil, and he was just as good, and he wanted $500 per video for pretty much the same thing. So yeah, as you can see, it's a pretty good idea to keep that in mind. All right, so now hopefully you are at the point where you hired a really good editor that you're really happy with. Now it's time to learn how to communicate with them and build a system so that it doesn't become a nightmare. Because even though you have hired a really good editor, you need to be able to really learn how to communicate well with them. Otherwise, it will become a nightmare where you have to spend a bunch of time dealing with that person, giving feedback back and forth, having misunderstandings and all that kind of stuff. So it's super important that you have a system for the communication so that everything is just streamlined. And this is something that I've spent the past few months on building, and I'm still working on it. And it's also something that I want to teach other people how to do in my new program that I'm still working on. So stay tuned for that. Basically, what you want to do is you want to standardize all of your content so you have the exact same format for every single video. The videos are not supposed to challenge your video editors in terms of skills. It should be pretty easy for them to do, and also pretty easy for them to understand exactly what you want. So what I would recommend that you do is that you standardize everything in your video so that you have the exact same fonts, the exact same colors, the exact same animations and all that kind of stuff. Of course, it's gonna vary a little bit depending on the type of video that you make, but 80 to 90% of the videos are gonna be pretty much the same. And you wanna write all of this down in a standard operating procedure, also called an SOP. And I know this sounds super boring, especially for you creators out there that just wanna be creative and not have to deal with preparation and all that kind of stuff. I know I'm totally like that as well, but I promise you, it's totally worth it. Because if you do this, then you will be able to make a lot of videos and then not having to communicate with your editor pretty much at all. Of course, there will always be maybe a thing or two that you want to comment on the videos, but it will be very minimal compared to if you don't do this, then you will have to make a ton of comments for every single video and then end up spending just as much time dealing with the editor than you would just editing it yourself. And if that's the case, then you might as well just edit it yourself. So it's super important that you have a system and make this SOP, okay? Then you also want to have a system for giving feedback. So you don't want to just receive the video in Google Drive and then having to make screenshots and all that kind of stuff to give feedback. It's way easier to just use a program like Frame.io where you can easily make comments on different timestamps and also draw on the video and all that kind of stuff. That makes it super streamlined and super easy to give comments. So I definitely recommend that. All right, so I know this whole process sounds a bit overwhelming and it sounds like something that takes a bunch of time, but I promise you it's definitely worth it. And my advice to you is just to keep it simple. Just take the first steps, start finding good editors on ytjobs.co or X, and then reach out to them, hop on a call with a couple of them, and then see if they're a good fit, and then take it from there. Because if you keep procrastinating with this, then you will just keep on costing yourself a bunch of money and keep being trapped working in your business and not on it, and not being able to scale and make the money you actually want to make. So now you know how to hire a really good editor that can free up a bunch of your time. So now it's time to spend all of that extra time on the real money-making skills. So now I want you to click on this video right here where I show you exactly where you can spend all of your freed up time to make even more money. So click on that and then I'll see you in the next video. Bye.